If you think the music industry is all about streams and TikTok trends, think again. Today we're talking to Jeff Ferguson, owner of Run Out Groove Records in Burbank, a man who's seen the music biz from both sides, the boardroom and the record bin, with over 30 years in marketing and advertising, including a stint as the marketing manager for Napster 2.0 before Best Buy swooped in. Jeff has been in the trenches during the wildest evolutions of music consumption. In this interview, he's spilling the tea on what it really means to sell physical records in a digital world, from working with major labels to how vinyl and CDs can still make or break an artist's career, to exactly how much a retail store earns off each album. Spoiler, it's not as romantic as you think. So if you've ever wondered what keeps the heartbeat of analog music alive, or you just want a front row seat to the unfiltered reality of record sales in 2025, this one's for you. All right. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me here. And sorry for the disaster of traffic here.
No worries.
Okay. So we have a lot to talk about. So you were telling me off cam that you worked for the advertising industry for more than 15 years.
I did for almost 30. I started off in 95, came out of colleges with degrees in computer science and advertising. And originally I thought I was going to be a copywriter. And in 95, every interview I was going on, people were asking about the internet and web marketing and things like that.
Right.
And originally I was kind of like, no, I'm a copywriter. That's what I'm trying to do. And
right.
And I was kind of say I got my first invoice for my student loan. And then the next interview went on and I goes, I know everything about the internet. I'm an internet expert. From there, I got that job. It was a small company that nobody really remembers anymore. But then I worked for Hilton Hotels and Kimberly-Clark for a while, and came back to California after that, and worked for one of the IPG advertising kind of family for a bit, and got back in LA. Worked for Experian for a little bit. I was kind of like the last head of digital marketing for Napster before Best Buy bought them, and a few other little firms after that, and then eventually just decided to start my own agency, and then did that for 15 years. These days, as part of Amplitude Digital, which we merged with just before the pandemic, and then the original founders decided to move on. So now it's all back to just being me and my team and everything like that.
Right.
So we've still got clients and things like that, but these days it feels like it's more about the record store than anything else. But it's definitely was a funny path that I worked mostly in the digital side of things, and then I end up in this physical media type of business. But
So you said that you worked for Napster.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. So this is when they became a legit.
What we often call like Napster 2.0, and it was.
Okay, that's how you first. Okay.
Yeah, and it was another company had actually bought their name out of like bankruptcy court for it, and then rebranded what. It was technically before they were calling it streaming, but it was one of the first streaming applications that were out there. And they were focusing, on downloads and things like that. So it was very much similar to, like the original version of iTunes and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it was, it was just doing MP3s instead of some of the other ones.
Yeah.
It was an interesting time. We were the branding wise, it was a lot of work because we had that coolness of being Napster, but also a lot of my job was reminding people because we're not illegal anymore. We're completely legit, and the government is going to kick down to your door for abusing us or anything like that.
Right. But I do remember, not remember it to this day. Whenever I mention, so on my channel, I always encourage people to use Napster over Spotify because they actually give higher payouts to artists.
Yeah.
So I was like, if you are really supporting artists, you should be using Napster.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. These days they just got bought again. Like another company bought them, and I think they have big visions to make it into some kind of like augmented reality or virtual reality kind of system where they're going to do virtual concerts and things. So they're looking forward to kind of seeing what the new Napster is going to really look like. But,
Right. Like so in hindsight, what do you think is wrong in terms of them not being able to get considerable market share away from like Spotify or
Sadly, I think they got, so it's interesting. So when we were there, we were actually making a lot of great strides, and Spotify was just starting to come out. And
Right.
so technically we obviously, the original Napster predated Spotify. And then just as Spotify was coming up, we were there. And then they got bought by Best Buy. And technically I was there during that transition. And then Best Buy had like its worst holiday season ever, and they ended up laying a bunch of people off. And then after that, I don't think Best Buy really knew what to do with us. Like it was,
Okay.
it was. I think they had these aspirations to where they'd go, "Oh, this is great, and we can, feature them in the retail locations, and we could make it a whole thing, and whatever it is." And then it just kind of languished for a long time, and it got bought by another company that tried to make it into a streamer, and I don't think it ever really took off. And so it was. In hindsight, I guess the best word is that it was probably mishandled as a business, for such a brand that was such a revolutionary brand inside of it. But it just really didn't end up with a good home and to where somebody could really make it what it is. And yeah, again, it'd be interesting to see what this new owner is going to do something with it. But I think it was ahead of its time on multiple times, but and really we never picked up the lingo of calling it streaming. Like that was
Right.
like that. I mean, just at that point, like even Netflix was still doing physical media and things like that, and was just starting to try. What eventually got called streaming, but they still weren't calling it streaming yet. There
Right.
was just digital, so it was an interesting time, and I think we just got lost in the shuffle
Yeah.
around that time. But,
Yeah. Well, I do. I have high hopes for it, just because.
Yeah.
I mean, it's giving so much to the artists, and at the end of the day, that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want your music, then you need your artists to actually earn money. But what's your preferred music platform?
So I still use Spotify when I do bother to stream, which is usually just when I'm in the car these days. But
Right.
yeah, every now and then we actually do use it in the store when it's something where maybe it's brand new or something along those lines. But the record store itself is we're mostly dedicated towards physical media and mostly just vinyl records, and so it's kind of we almost feel like we're cheating sometimes if we do have to stream something in an instance, and that happens more than we'd like. We
Right.
do these listening events as part of the promotion for the store and some new artists and things like that, and we say like at the very least send us a CD so we can play that, but sometimes because we're getting music maybe like a week or two before it actually comes out, they send us a locked streaming copy that we have to pull in, and we're just kind of hoping it doesn't
Right,
doesn't give
right.
us any trouble, but most of the time it's good. Nobody
Okay.
seems to matter.
Well, you mentioned the record store.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you decided to do this full time 7 years ago.
So we've been in existence for about 3 years.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now I know that seems to be a resurgence of this. I know it was going down for a really long time. At some point, I really thought it was going to like die a
Yeah.
natural death. But there seems to be a resurgence, specifically vinyl. So number one, do you see any kind of trend? Like what kind of artists that actually do well on vinyl, and what do you think is pushing this resurgence?
So it's really fascinating. So obviously the big heyday of vinyl was during the 70s, and
Right.
and that carried through. And even though other media like cassette tapes and CDs were kind of introduced in the 80s and the 90s, and it did drop to a very low level during that time frame. And technically, like the resurgence of vinyl is really been happening for more than a decade by this point too. But now we're actually back up sales wise to where vinyl was back in the 80s. So it's it's obviously not the 70s level, and I don't know if it'll ever get up to that. But it's definitely very powerful, and a lot of that was driven by my generation, which is Gen X, but it seemed to skip the millennials almost entirely. They seem to be really just firmly holding into it. But Gen Z and younger seem to be the ones that are really driving it. They're actually now the largest segment of physical media buying that's happened to it. And a lot of that is the modern kind of pop stars that are out there, and there's some great data that is floating around where of that like new vinyl sales to it, like 20% of it is like Taylor Swift. It's it's like this massive chunk of stuff
Of
that's all Taylor
course.
Swift, and her variants and just how popular it is and everything like that is driving a lot of it. But that does bring them in and basically it gets them into finding other artists and finding other things to it. So we've noticed that when we do promotional things or we do listening parties or whatever it is, it really does have to be on kind of that side of the world as in that era of things. It has the pop stars and things like that. And we've had some of the kind of the indie or the alternative acts that have been around and they still do well. And, we did one for Pearl Jam not too long ago and that was pretty big, and Linkin Park did well and things like that. But there's other ones where, when it comes to maybe like country music or even hip hop, at least in our neighborhood, whatever it is, we're not seeing that same kind of grab there, but it is growing. Like I can see the hip hop starting to grow, which is I think kind of ironic because one, that's my background. I grew up out here in Paramount and Compton and things like that, so hip hop was definitely part of my DNA. But it's one of the things where they were very focused, of using vinyl in their production of their music and of their art form and things like that. And yet there seemed to be more leaning towards the digital medium than anything else. But I actually heard a really interesting thing where one of the newest artists and the winner of this year's best rap album, Doechii, she's the first in a very long time to be a new artist that broke into the top 10, for the first time. And they said a lot of that was the fact that people ran out and actually bought the vinyl record or a version of her album after she won the Grammy. And so, we're all cheering. It goes, oh, yeah, yay, vinyl. Thank you. Yeah, we made a difference. We actually pushed things over. So that's it. Yeah.
So is there a specific marketing strategy when it comes to vinyl?
Not overly specific. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's a very retail strategy, and given my background in digital, I was able to jump into a lot of the modern promotional methods of it, so social media and just basic stuff like making sure that you show up on Google properly and that when people search for record stores they find you and things like that. So it wasn't an overly complex strategy when it comes to like a local marketing strategy, but we do get to have a lot of more fun where obviously working with the labels and working with the artists and making sure that we're doing a lot of events and things like that to kind of generate this kind of community feel to the store itself and make it kind of a hub and a place that people want to come to and hang out and check out new music. That was kind of like the newer side for me, given that I'd worked in digital for so long. I had to kind of really relearn to deal with the physical world, which so those type of integrations and those kind of events things were something I knew how to do, but I just hadn't had a lot of practice. And now I'm having a blast doing them. They're very fun, and all these events and working with things. It almost creeps more into like a business development style relationship and less than marketing, but it's all under the same roof, right? So.
Okay, so you mentioned labels, and we will get to that. But before that, is there like where do you think the vinyl community is going, or the trend? Do you think it's here to stay, or do you think it's just it'll have a 7-year run and then people are going to go back to streaming?
Let's hope not. Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I think, and I'm usually not alone in this, is that I think it was almost like we swung too far into digital for a minute, and then especially during the pandemic and right after the pandemic, I think people were really longing for something they could hold on to, right? Like that kind of physical realm to it, and you ended up, especially Gen Z and younger, they were really longing for a connection with the physical world because there so much was online and so much was digital and so much whatever and all the social and all the other things to it. and they really wanted to kind of get out and sense of community and kind of get back into the real world. And this is just one aspect of it. And you're seeing that not just in vinyl sales, but you're also seeing bookstores are starting to make a comeback, and a lot of other stores that are like that, where you're dealing with that kind of physical product that isn't just like stuff. It's something where it feels it gives them a sense of ownership of what they're doing, and plus they're the artists are getting behind it too, because they're telling them like, this is actually, if you really want to support us, this is the best way to do it, because we actually make some money when somebody buys a record or a CD or whatever it is, versus streaming, where, like you said, it's not the best business model for an artist to be in.
Right. Okay, so you think vinyl is going to transition into something premium?
It is. It's funny is that it's always been kind of a premium hobby. As far as things go, it's never been a particularly inexpensive hobby to be in.
Right.
And while if you look at some record collectors that maybe have been involved this whole time, and they can remember like when they used to be able to pop into a record store, and it's like, oh, I used to get that at $1 at a garage sale or something like that, and it's like, well, it's not that time anymore, because used records you are dealing with in antique when it really comes down to it. But all the new records, they look at those prices, and maybe they're paying anywhere between like $25 to $35 for a new record. But if you go back and see when vinyl was first introduced back in the 40s, it's very similar. Like, adjusted for inflation, the prices actually line up pretty well. So it's one of the things where like you always had to have a little money to be able to like collect records and buy records and things like that. And even during the 70s, it was very similar as far as price wine goes. So it was never something that was particularly cheap, unless you got the singles or things like that. And that's the why why singles became a very popular medium for teenagers for a long time, because it was a good way for them to get into it without actually having to buy a full album, which was kind of expensive. So.
Okay, so vinyl actually counts into Billboard 200.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you feel? I know that there has been an issue about The Weeknd doing bundling, and even Taylor Swift. I guess my first question is, how do you feel about it? And second is, how bad is the bundling as a strategy to boost the song's popularity?
I think it's okay. I mean, it's funny. I always kind of point to the idea that I was a comic book collector since I was a kid, whatever it is, and a lot of the strategies that I'm seeing these days for the vinyl side of the business looks very similar to what it is, and the idea of kind of having all the different variants and all the different covers and different color vinyl and all these kind of things to it, and making it very exclusive, or certain versions that you can only get direct from the artist and things like that. It is it's a great strategy to it. It can get a little frustrating sometimes when you deal on the side of it, and I can certainly feel for the fans sometimes sometimes there's a certain amount of exhaustion you hear from them, where I'm going like, oh, I don't, do I have to buy 8 versions of this to it? And we always get to remind them, because you really don't. I mean, if you're a collector, it's like you don't have to get all the variants to it. If you're really just buying it to listen to it, it doesn't sound any different no matter which color you get on it. But there is some things that are kind of interesting to watch happen now, where it used to be that an artist would maybe wait until like a major anniversary to do like a deluxe version, or it's like, oh, this is extra stuff, and this is all the B-sides, all kinds of stuff to it. Now you have artists that were like just a year later, they would say well, now this is deluxe and this is what it is. And we saw that with Sabrina Carpenter, and with Charlie XCX, and definitely Taylor with the mini versions and things like that to it, and certain ones where like you can only get this at Target and you can get this type of thing. So we certainly sometimes go like, well, that's a bit exhausting, but also as a retailer that is selling these things, you go like, yes, please buy 8 of them. It's fantastic. So we certainly feel for them, but we also are willing to participate in it, because it's a great way to drive sales. But
okay, but do you think, like, take off your retailer hat and just think about the music industry in general?
Yeah.
Do you think it's too artificial?
I don't think it's artificial, right? And I think it's, I think it's just a more, modern way to look at it for what it is. And some of these practices aren't necessarily even new. Like there were different color vinyl that would come out to it, or special covers, or different things that came to. And if you were a collector, like I always kind of point to the Beatles. The Beatles had it down. Like they were, as far as like variants and merchandise and all the kind of stuff to it, they did all the things. Elvis Presley was good at that type of stuff too. And so it's not necessarily a new concept as far as like pop music goes, right? But it's something where it did fall away for a while when physical media wasn't as big a thing. So like it's really more of a resurgence, and with that resurgence, I think everybody said, "Great, let's go back to these great standards on how to do these things to it." And it's funny, and even some of the smaller artists, they maybe they'll only do like 2 different versions. There's a well-known thing that's the indie edition to it that is for the independent stores like us, and sometimes this is different color vinyl, or maybe it's a nicer cover or things like that. But we think it's kind of fun. And as an indie record store, we certainly like the idea that they're putting records out that encourages people to visit the indie stores and, not just get it from Amazon or Target or things like that. So,
Right. Okay, so you mentioned earlier that events is a huge thing in driving people, foot traffic, I guess, in your store.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you also have your own list where you market your events to.
For the most part, I mean, social's the biggest driver of it. We're very popular on Instagram these days, and we're doing more and more with TikTok and some of the other kind of platforms to it, and that's a whole like big effort on its own for the sure. But our own websites are one of the promotions for it, but a lot of times. We're noticing some of the biggest boosts we get is working with influencers and making sure that they're involved and things. We did a really big influencer push for Record Store Day, which was the
one that just happened.
It just happened, and we had some local influencers in. Then Fred Armisen came in and actually did a bit inside the store, and all those things really helped. Feature us, and we had a giant line that day thanks to that and everything. And we, for the first time since we started participating in Record Store Day, like we sold almost all of the stock on the first day, and so that was a big win for us on that front. But it's when it comes down to it, it's all very much marketing. But there's it's just finding just every possible place that we can make sure that people understand like that we're doing these types of things. So,
okay. So when you're doing all of these events, what kind of support are you getting from the label, if at all? Or is this something that you as a store owner just comes up with? Or is there an organization of independent record stores?
Yeah, so believe it or not, most of it is coming from the labels, and it comes via another organization called that's the Record Store Day organization that actually help get these in front of us for the most part. Now that we're coming up on 3 years old, and we're working with the labels directly a lot more. Now we're getting to the point where the labels are reaching out to us and saying, "Would you like to host one of these?" And we can do a special one for you or things like that. And we've had a couple where we were almost exclusive to it, and we're going like, "Oh, that's amazing." That was like a big win for us, and we're also getting to the point now to where the artists are getting involved. So we've had people drop by on its own. For instance, we did the early listening event for the new Head and the Heart album last night. And one of the band members actually showed up to the event and signed autographs and things like that. And that's kind of just a big mind blower for a lot of the people. And Burbank is a big city. It's the media capital of the area, but it still has a very small town kind of feel to it in the right area. And so there's people that just live there are just still kind of blown away the fact that like, wow, Linkin Park came to your store, or Green Day came to your store. And so that's very fun and still mind-blowing for me, because you watch it all kind of happen, roll out in front of you and go like, wow, look what we did. This is amazing.
Right. So when you're working with a label, what kind of benefit do they give you?
So a lot of times they make sure that we've got the records early, or we've got at least the music early, whatever it is. But they're really good at sending posters or different type of swag, and for the Head and Heart last night, they did matchbooks, which was kind of creative, and some other giveaways. I remember a while back we did it was for the event for the Barbie soundtrack, and Warner Brothers sent all kinds of swag, and there was fancy heart-shaped glasses and hats and all kinds of things to it. And actually, was it 2 weeks ago we did one for the band Ghost, which is a Swedish nu metal kind of band to it. And that one, they had these great kind of labyrinth games that we gave away, and then it was a midnight release, so they were party favors and hats that look like this one character that's on all the records and things like that. So there's a lot of that that comes these days, and it's very supportive, and the fans eat that up. I've never seen anything like it. A lot of times you're just going, it's just a poster, but they want that poster. They want their, and we'll get all kinds of questions leading up to it. It goes, how many did you get? Is everybody going to get one? Is this? What do you have to do to get there? Are they for sale? That's the one that cracks me up. Because no, it's just you just got to be in the room, and it's cool. But with more and more, a lot of sports, and you do get a sense these days too where they're trying to outdo each other. It's like, oh, what did they do? Oh, let's do something bigger, or let's do something fun. And every time we open up that box, it goes, wow, look what they did. So we've got Eric Church has got a new album out on Friday, and that one they sent out a nice box set and a bunch of other swag to it. And that one's not even a regular listening event; it's just kind of like a release day event, kind of thing. And so they're really getting into it, and we I wouldn't say we sign up for all of them, but we sign up for a lot of them because we know it really does bring people into the store.
Okay. So what I'm getting at is, so there's this huge talk about labels copying the super fan business model of K-pop, where they really cultivate a community around an artist and constantly sell to this community. And just like the Swifties, I guess they would buy 36 versions of an album all in one go.
The K-pop people got it down. That is some marketing mastery right there.
They do. So I guess what you're saying is that this culture is actually not new.
No, not at all. I mean, I kind of always point to, like how long pop has been doing that type of marketing for things. And I mentioned the Beatles before. And, I always kind of tell people, like, you got to remember, Beatles were kind of like the original boy band when it came down to it. And a lot of what you see, the K-pop bands and BTS and all these other ones that they're doing are lifting a lot of that type of marketing strategy to it, and that's why the concerts look like very familiar. If you've ever seen any of the footage of like when the Beatles would be getting off the plane, and fans would be on the tarmac, and people are screaming and fainting and doing all kinds of stuff to it, and it's very much that. And there was different periods where you would see that kind of get big again. When Michael Jackson was at his biggest, that was a massive thing to it, where there was every type of merchandise you could get imaginable, from that. Elvis Presley, I mentioned before, so you've had periods where, if an artist was big enough, they would lean into it, and they had all the things, right? And that's certainly coming back. Taylor Swift definitely embraced that, and that's like probably the biggest part of it. And you're seeing some of her other pop contemporaries definitely taking advantage of it. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was like copying it, because I think K-pop definitely brought its own flavor to it, and there's a lot of other influences and a lot of great thinking. It's as a marketer, I'm constantly impressed at what they're pulling off with that type of thing. And I think everybody kind of like steals from each other as far as ideas and where you can take this thing and how big it is. But it's certainly not a new concept, I guess, in that sense. But it's definitely probably like at its largest I've ever seen it, like that. And it was also, from a much wider variety of artists. Like there's so many more doing it. It's, like before, like the Beatles were just king of that before, and Elvis before that and things like that. But now, seeing this with the merchandising and all the things and all the extra things you can buy, the books and the magazines and the online sites and the swag and things like that. It's the biggest I've ever seen it, and just in my life. And I've been a fan of pop music for over 50 years at this point. So.
Right. So I guess my question would be, what held? So definitely the Beatles started it. Mm-hmm. Even music videos, I guess we can say that they started that entire thing. That they started this entire thing. But then it was really K-pop that took it to that level of like fanaticism, that where you're buying. I don't think it's normal to buy 26 copies of the same thing. And like the only difference are the photos. It really is. So my question would be, what held, when the West could have taken it to that level, what held it back? Is it the culture? Is it?
It might be a cultural thing. It might, and it's hard to say like why it isn't gone completely as big as that. I mean, although I guess some would argue, right? You know, like
Right.
you know, like if you look at everything that's around the Swiftie culture, which is massive, and to see like all the things that are associated with that, and you know, I don't know if you've ever been to her concerts. I haven't, but you can see all the footage, and you've seen all the swag that comes away with that, whatever it is, and I haven't seen that many variants of like things for sale at a concert since I went to a Kiss concert years ago, and they're the guys from Kiss are masters of marketing. They had everything, and you could get makeup on site and all kinds of things to it. But again, you know, the Swifties just took it to a whole nother layer, and it's impressive, you know, and it's fun. It's so as long as I guess nobody feels like they're being taken advantage of, you could just push it that much further. But that said, I'm surprised they haven't pushed it even further, given what I've seen come out of the K-pop market.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And there's a lot because I think what the K-pop industry did is that they've essentially made music the most insignificant part of the entire
It's almost secondary to it, really.
right.
Yeah.
Like it's almost just I guess it's just an excuse to have a reason to support somebody. And yes, I've been to a concert of Taylor Swift just because I was very, very curious on how the thing is actually going on. And I thought I would never see the day when fans like those of Michael Jackson would have a resurgence when they're really crying. And I thought, all love to say Taylor Swift. She has a lot of great songs, but there are some songs that kind of sound similar.
Oh yeah, and that happens with pop, right?
And
you
so I
find
was like,
your style, right? You know, so,
kind of sounds the same as the other song. Why are you all reacting like this? But there's just something there. So I guess it was just like so. As a lover of music, do you think that we will come to a point where music will become just an excuse for people to support pop stars?
It's a good question. So I mean, I do think they could quite possibly get to a saturation point to where everybody just kind of starts to reject it from the standpoint and say like, no, it's more about the music, and I'm not into this type of things. And I think that's always happened, right? Like I think there's always been periods where you get very tribal about your music and the genre that you're after, and I never particularly fell into that trap because I just liked everything from the get-go because I was kind of raised to like all these different things, and where the neighborhood I grew up in was much different genre-wise than what my dad listened to for sure, and my dad certainly tried to do it. So like I really pushed beyond it, and then I got into jazz on my own other things. So I never really understood that. Hey, look, either you're a metal guy or you're nothing, or you're a Swiftie or you're nothing kind of stuff to it. That particularly never made any sense to me, but because why limit yourself when it comes to music? But I think that kind of saturation with all the stuff and all the artists and all the variants and stuff can reach a saturation and backlash type of point where people reject it and they stop doing it all the time. And I know that came up with with Taylor Swift's like last album with Tone Poets. There was not Tone Poets. There's a Dead Poets Society, I think is what it is, and
Right.
There was a lot of question of whether or not like she finally hit the wall when it came to like, were there too many variants here, were there whatever it is, and people still bought them, and there's still plenty of it, and people, we still have our share of Swifties that are still coming in, even though she doesn't have like a new album, and she had just a 45 for Record Store Day this year, and it was a song
45?
from and it was a song from the last album, and the only real new part of it was it was the first time there was one remix that was the first time it was on physical media, but you could get it on streaming before, but we still sold hundreds of them, so
Right.
it was so I'm going, okay, well maybe it's not saturated yet, maybe it's fine,
Right.
but
Right.
I know where I look at it, and again, because I was a comic book collector for a long time, comic books had that problem for a while where there was so many variants and so many different things, and when you got past the 80s and into the 90s, there was a backlash to it where people said, well, we're just not going to do this anymore, you guys have gone too far, but then now you look at modern comic book selling, and they're back to doing all the variants and all the different the special features and things like that, and nobody seems to matter, and I think ultimately what it is people will just kind of find their own way. Will just go like, I'm not going to buy 8 copies of this, I'm just going to get the one that I like, and I'm just
Right.
going to get this color and whatever it is, and that's fine, but it will ultimately it won't tank sales, but it will, for certain pop artists, I think it will make sales suffer a little bit, and it will probably call into question whether or not their rankings on billboards or things like that was kind of artificially inflated because people were buying 8 of everything at a given time, and that made the numbers skyrocket and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see like how long that takes, but. And maybe the current like political and financial market that we're kind of wandering into now, that might be the thing that does it. But I haven't seen any slowdown on that just yet. So,
Okay, well that's good to hear. I mean, I know that artists earn more on physical copies than they do on streaming.
Definitely,
So I mean, for me, just for that reason, I think it's worth like pushing the physical copies. Okay, let's get into distribution. Can you describe the process, like working with labels? How does it happen when they want to distribute to you? Do you go directly to them, or is there a middleman, an organization that does all of this, where you're listed and you order a copy, or do they tell you how many you need to sell? How does it work?
They don't do that, but they're so when you're first starting out, you usually work with these organizations that are called one-stops, and these are major kind of like distributor style like companies that are out there, and there's 2 really big ones that are out there. There's Alliance and there's All Media Supply, and both of them have been around for a very long time, and now we're certainly enjoying the fact that physical media has gotten much larger, and Alliance is a really interesting like story because they, in order to kind of like make up for the fact that physical media wasn't selling as well, they got into different media, and so they were selling video games and they were selling accessories and all kinds of stuff just to kind of round out their offering to make more money off of it. And then vinyl came back and said, oh, they're doing a lot of vinyl again. So, but those are like the big ones that you really have to start working with because the labels won't work with you directly when you're smaller. And so we're finally at this point now where we are able to work directly with it, and we work with Universal directly and Warner directly, and there's some other smaller labels that are out there like Red Eye and Light in the Attic and things like that, and some of these older labels that have been around for a long time like Sub Pop and things like that deal in the punk markets that we can deal directly with, and that's finally starting to happen, and that's good for us too because the margins are better when you actually get it directly, and there's also a lot of exclusives or even just that it's available at all. Sometimes is the best way to get it. We've run into problems a lot of times with things to where it should have been really easy to get a hold of a record to sell because it was coming out, or we were doing the listening event and it should have just been available to us, whatever it is. And ultimately, we said, okay, we're going to put our order in. And it goes, oh, they're gone already. And we end up having to like call out some of our contacts at the labels that said like, we just did the event and we don't have anything to sell now because of this. And that actually just happened with the Eric Church release, where we should have just very easily been able to get a hold of this copy, and we had to reach out to Universal and say like, we can't actually sell it. We don't have any to sell, and we've got all this swag and nothing to sell. But so it's an interesting like progression of it, and if you really don't hustle on a lot of this and make those connections and reach out and knock on the doors and say like, we really do want to work with you directly and go through this process of establishing credit and all the forms and things like that. I can see how a lot of like smaller record stores would just say, well, no, we're just not going to bother. We're just going to sell used records, and that way we don't have to mess with all of this. But we know that was the way that we were going to be able to like grow the business is to make sure that we had the new along with the used, and so that means working with the labels and working with everybody we can. So,
okay. So before we get into establishing your record to be able to get to the labels, but when you're working with the labels, are they, just to get more in the technical and logistical side of things, do you tell them, I want 100 copies, for example? Or do they tell you, if you're going to work with us, you're going to have to guarantee that you're going to sell 100?
No, they don't dictate that. Yeah, literally, we could work with a label and say we just want one of them if we want, like that. It doesn't come up that often, but but there are plenty of times where maybe it's a newer artist, and we're not the biggest store in the world, so sometimes we go like, all right, we'll get a couple and see where it goes. And if it's something where if we sell those immediately, we'll go back for more and make sure we have it. There's plenty of times where we will say, like we know this is going to sell, so we'll do a larger order from it. And we've now that we're working direct, we haven't had a Taylor Swift one yet, but but it's bound to happen. So when those happen, we know like just order 100 of them or just do whatever. But yeah, they wouldn't dictate to say like if you're going to play, you have to do this kind of stuff to it. They do some fun. Other things where they'll let us know about specials and other things to it and say, hey, we're trying to do a big push for this title because it's coming out or what it is, and they'll work with us on that. But and to say to do that you have to do this much, but it's never really a quantity level, and that we're really happy about because otherwise we wouldn't be able to participate at all.
Right. But when you put an order, is that a guaranteed sale? You cannot return the.
Yeah, for the most part, it is guaranteed. There are exceptions and that are rare, and it's usually involved to where if we've got like a signing event or if we're doing there's something special to it, they'll make an exception to say like you can return these if they don't sell on it. But we lately. It's funny. I've got that fear in me of getting stuck with dead stock because we're just not the biggest space in the world, and we wouldn't have any place to put it. But there have been times where I'm really negotiating hard to say like, please let me know I can send some of this back or whatever it is. The recent Ghost record was like that, where we're saying like we'll take more, and the label actually was heavily involved with it. And I was kind of saying like, just as long as we get it, I don't want to get stuck, with too many couples to it. And then ultimately we sold through all of them that night when we did it. And now we're going like, can we get some more, please? Whatever. So it's a much different vibe for it, but it's, but for the most part, you are kind of stuck with them for whatever. And that's one of the big problems I think with Record Store Day is you have to really learn your audience and your neighborhood and what go and sometimes you miss it completely and you just don't get enough of something. But now we just did our 7th Record Store Day and because they do them twice a year. And, finally get to the point where it goes, I think I got it great this year. I think, we weren't stuck with anything after the fact. And there were only a few titles where I look at it and, I guess I definitely could have ordered more of that. Like that would have done that all day.
Right.
Yeah.
So are the deal standard, meaning your cut is the same as Target, for example, or the bigger you grow?
Yeah, that I don't have any insights in. So I've always kind of assumed that a Target or an Amazon, they probably have a better deal because they're buying so much of these things. And but then again, like with Amazon and with Target and Walmart's another one to it, they're at the point to where they're doing colors that are only available there. So like we regularly see it, and it's funny. We usually see them on the rebound. So like somebody will sell one to us, or we get it through another party that is actually like picking up overstock from those different places to it. So we'll end up being able to sell like the Target Red or the Walmart Blue editions in the store because they bought so many of them and then they sent it back and then we said, well, now you can get them or whatever it is. And there was that even happened with the last Taylor Swift one where there were certain colors that were only supposed to be available on our website or only available at certain stores, whatever it is. And then later on they said, we've got plenty. Like, the rest of you can take them now. I said, we'll take them. That's great. The canary yellow one, finally, whatever it is. And the fans are very happy about that too, because a lot of times they think they missed out on certain things. Right.
So then your margins, you can adjust your margins. So if you get it for a certain price, you can pull it down just to attract.
We could, yeah, and that certainly happens. I mean, there is the kind of concept of once you've got certain things, we can make our own decisions on how much we want to make on those certain things, and usually right out of the gate, we'll make sure that it's not at the maximum, but it's within like the margins that we're shooting for, most of the time. And then if we do get stuck with it, or if there's some other kind of special that the label wants to work with it to push things a little bit more, they'll come back and say, oh, we're doing a rebate. So you can actually get like a little bit of that back if you sell it just in this time, because we're trying to like pump them up the charts and things like that, which happens all the time. And,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll answer this. But what's the margin?
It varies, right? So I always kind of tell people like the typical margin for retail, like if you just looked at, hey, this is the average margin for retail, it's about 20%, and we're lucky enough that records are a bit more than that, and then as the store, our margins can be better than that just because of the used records, which is a lot of times we're buying things. we're buying giant collections and things like that, and the price all flattens out, and a lot of times you end up with one that is what we call a zinger, which is like, it's like, oh, this one we paid the same amount as everything else to do it, but that record is worth $200, $300, $400 because
Right.
it's just our super rare record, and that happens, and it certainly helps with our overall margins for the store. But the new side of things to it is the more restrictive margins is what it goes, and we've got our own rules to it where we basically said, hey, look, you may be able to get it cheaper somewhere, but you are making a decision to buy it from an independent record store. And so it might be a few dollars more. And we thank you for making that decision to do that because, you're supporting a small business.
Yeah.
But and we've seen that a lot lately where people are making that effort to come in and they'll just say like, I don't want to buy this from Amazon, or I don't want to buy this from like that. I would rather support you. And so they're more than willing to, kick in a couple extra dollars for
Yeah.
it. So,
Well, that's not anything I constantly tell my followers. Just support local businesses.
Yeah.
More
it's like,
go to the local businesses.
Oh, we're the lifeblood of things, and just in the United States or whatever. There's more of us than there are the big stores. Like when it comes to these things, when you collectively do it, we may not always have the buying power as an individual to it, but it's something where if as I've said, like if we got together and kind of approached them and said, hey, look, we're a big group, as if you tied it, if you added us all up, you really should respect that to it, and I think the labels have certainly recognized that, which is why we've got Record Store Day, or why we've got certain versions that are only available at our types of stores and things like that. So I think that's their concession on that one, is to drive people back and say, like, not everybody's going to want the Target one or whatever it is. But,
Yeah, there's a lot of my followers are Asian music fans. And then I would always segment them into two, because there's the K-pop, which is very much mainstream to a certain extent, I guess. But then there's also the other side of like Japanese artists fans and Indonesian artist fans. And that segment is largely ignored. Like when artists from Japan that have a huge fan base here come to the US, there's really nowhere for the fans to interact with them.
Right.
Unlike Target, where they can invite the artist to walk into a store and sign some records, and they don't, all of these other Asian artists don't have. So maybe that's something that you can address, like a record. Yeah.
It's funny. It's come up to it. I was last year. I was at a record industry event that was just for record store owners, whatever it is, and there was a lot of talk and a lot of people suggesting it, where they go like, you're not going to believe it, but the K-pop thing is giant. Like and it's a lot of times they're telling these older record store people that have been selling classic rock for ages and stuff like that, and so the idea of like, maybe try this new one, maybe have a section just to get started, or whatever it is, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised. And we're certainly trying to build up our world music section to it, and given our neighborhood, where we've noticed that the most is a lot in the soundtracks and things like that. So like anytime we get any of the Studio Ghibli like soundtracks in, which are they do nice pressings of those now and things like that, they go immediately, whatever it is, and there's a lot of we're known for having a really large jazz section, and there's a lot of great Japanese jazz that's come out over the years too, and so we're trying to say like, let's build that section up. That seems to be a big thing to it, but yeah, and then sometimes it's stuff that's just classic things that have been around forever. Like anytime we get more copies of the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack, it just goes, like that. And a lot of times all we have to do is like put on my copy, and we've got speakers outside, and people will immediately run in and go like, is that Cowboy Bebop? I go, yeah, come on in. And they've got all those different variants and things to it. And there's just a lot of fun stuff that's coming out of that market that people are into. And I'm, like, it's not something that I necessarily grew up with. But it's something where I'm going, yeah, I'll give it a shot, and once I listen to it, I goes, no, I dig this. This is good. What it is, a lot of the lo-fi stuff that's happening right now. And
oh my God, lo-fi.
Yeah. It's kind of fun too. And a lot of the labels have like picked up on that. For instance, actually it'll be next week, or actually it's tomorrow. Believe it or not, they're just in time for like Star Wars Day, on May the 4th, whatever it is. They're doing like a Star Wars lo-fi, and they'd had that on streaming before, but this will be the first time they've collected it and put it on physical media. and we were getting requests like almost immediately. And so you've got two really active fan base. You've got this lo-fi kind of music and voice that's big on its own, and then Star Wars, right? And so we're going, yeah, this is bound to do something. So
Right.
we'll definitely buy a bunch of copies of that. But
Are you going to? Do you plan to ever do like live performances in your store?
oh, we do already. Yeah, we did that as soon as we moved to like the larger location, which was back in July of last year. We had, back when we were planning this thing in the kind of the last days of the pandemic, a lot of the early sketches for what a store could look like had a performance space in it. And our first location, we didn't really have any place to do it, although we still had live performances, which was kind of fun. They would just kind of like cram them into the corner of the rock section of this little 350 square foot space to it. But once we moved in this larger location, the first thing we said, like, this is going to be the stage. We actually, like, where the front window was, it used to be a display window for when it was just traditional retail. We built that out and extended it and made it so when you walk by, people are constantly blown away where they see like there's a band in the window, and we've got it worked out to where the sound goes outside and things like that. And so we've had local artists, we've had people that are on their way up, that are already starting to show to it, and we really do try and make sure that if anybody reaches out and says, like, I'd love to do that, it goes, yeah, come on in. And, like last weekend we had a great jazz artist, Larry Goldings, who's just famous in that business to it. We're still amazed we got him because he's just a legend in piano-based jazz. But then, like the next day was a local guy who's fantastic and he's got his own, fun fan base and things like that. But more and more we're starting to, work with the labels and say, hey, look, if you wanted to do something here, we're definitely game for this. It would, it'd take some coordination and make sure to do it, and they'd have to kind of almost do like an acoustic set and things like that because it's not a giant stage or anything, but it's something where you can see the wheels turning where they go, I'm like, yeah, I can see this working, I can make this work for it. And if it's not live people, we've had DJs and all kinds of other things to it, so it's something where we feel that's very much a part of it, and the whole store was designed that way. We wanted it to be more than just a bunch of like racks full of records and things like that. It's some people come in and say it's almost part art exhibit because we've got a lot of original posters from rock concerts and things like that, and that's just another form of collectible that takes up the wall space. And we've got vintage tees, and we've got like curated books that are about like rock and music and things like that, and so we really try and run that gamut with it without making it I guess too tacky, I guess is the word for it.
Right.
And so it's like, it's all the things that are, involved with music and adjacent to music, whatever it is, but without getting into where we're selling things that have nothing to do with anything. But, and not to knock Amoeba because they're the biggest players in California for sure, but they've got this giant like Funko section, of there that goes way beyond anything to do with music. We were Ellen, my partner, kind of goes, dude, let's not get into that. That would like, and I go, no, I understand. That would take up a whole store if we wanted to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you work or whoever it is that goes into your store to play live, is there payment involved? Do they get paid, or is it all for?
Right now we're not. Yeah, right now we kind of, and it's luckily enough who we've been dealing with have been a lot of like local artists and things like that who are just really just happy to get exposure, and sometimes they're just excited to like play outside. Like they go, oh, I was just playing there before, so they do it as part of that, and sometimes they do it as the release of a new record for their own and things like that. So they kind of understand that that's the promotional element to it, but. Ellen and I have had discussions recently where we're saying like we probably will have to get there at some point where we will have to pay for somebody to actually pay in there if we wanted to start stepping up in where it is. But that also, in our case, we have to be worried about that too because we really aren't a venue. Like we don't have like public restrooms, and we don't have you can't buy a beer while you're watching the show or things like that. So in our case, City of Burbank was pretty adamant about the fact that don't cross that line into becoming a venue because that's a whole nother permit and that's a whole nother thing. And we're in a Magnolia Park section of Burbank, which is this great little like vintagey kind of area to it, whatever it is. But there are houses right behind our store, like that. and so we'd have to be careful like of noise and things like that. And I think in the almost year we've been in the new location, we've only ever had one like noise complaint to it, and I think that was out of jealousy or something. But it was like, otherwise it's something where we're going, yeah, no, let's keep it tight and just the busker kind of stuff to it, and we don't want to get into the idea of selling tickets. All of our shows are free, and so it's just a matter of like, yeah, just show up and come in, and it really the whole purpose is to come into the store and and shop and do things like that, or at the very least be exposed to the store for the first time, which is we're more than happy to have happen. So.
Okay, so I will ask about where you want to take your business, but first. Do you do consignment for independent artists?
Every now and then, yeah. There's some of them we do that, and it's really kind of fun because we've had times where like the artists themselves come to the store and they're just getting started out, but it's kind of like we'd love it if you carried our record, and sometimes they do it as almost like a promotional stunt, which is kind of fun. Where we've had some just upstarts that come in and they'll say like, you don't even have to buy for this from me. Like we just want to put it in the rack. We just want to put it in like your 45 rack and say we pressed a 45, and that's what we want to do to it. And then they'll turn around and like share it on social and said like, oh, we just planted this here. And sometimes they'll make it sound like we didn't know about it, but we totally know about it. But says, oh, we snuck this into the rack. Like, goes, no, you didn't, but it's fine. Like plenty of times we do, and sometimes it's the people that are in the store where we'll work on a consignment business. But I think we're just more and more we're getting to the point to where we're going, no, we'll just buy them. And I think the only time there's ever really any kind of like an instantaneous thing is if they are playing in the store and they bring the records with them because we can't get them through one of our regular suppliers, and there's a deal that has to be made in that moment. But yeah, it happens every now and then. But,
okay. So would you say what would you say the ratio is between independent artists and those that are signed by majors?
The big labels do it?
Yeah.
It's majority like the big labels. I mean, there are some smaller labels that we do work with, like Coal Mine Records, which is mostly like a soul music and a jazz label and things like that. And Daptone, which is another one that leans more towards soul and jazz and things like that are smaller. So I guess they're still considered kind of like indie labels when it comes to it. Even the people that have this indie kind of look to them sometimes to it are still on a label that turns out to be owned by a massive label, right? And they're under it. And that's just a result of a lot of consolidation that's happened in that industry over the years, where like you can see these labels that were like just known, like, well, these are the cutting edge, and this is where all the punk rock artists came out of, or whatever it is. And then it turns out they're owned by Universal, or they're owned by Warner Brothers these days, or whatever it is. And a lot of the jazz labels are like that too. Like Blue Note, which was like the name in jazz music, is owned by Universal now, and there's a lot of other labels that are like that to wear under it. And even if they're not actively producing like new pressings for that one, every now and then you will see like an artist that is maybe a bit more established that will make a request to say, can we put this out so it looks like I'm on Verve, or can I that it looks like that? And some of them say like that's where it is. Like Nora Jones, for instance, who's been around for a bit now to it, but like that, but she is technically part of the Blue Note family, even though most people wouldn't go like, it goes, is Blue Note really putting anything out except like the classics these days? But they do have certain titles to it. There's even been some hip hop artists that have decided like, he goes, yep, put me on Blue Note. That's just legendary stuff, and I want to make sure I'm on there. But
now you mentioned Nora Jones. I miss her. She hasn't done anything in a while.
No, she's had a couple things that have been out. It's never been. She hasn't had like the really big radio hits like she did when she first came out, when I think everybody really fell in love with her. But now it's more like her hardcore fan base is really into it.
Right. Okay. If there's anything, what other help or assistance do you think an independent record label will actually should enjoy to help one? You guys? Yeah.
It's funny. I think there's this idea, and it's always hard to tell whether or not it's the label that's causing this, or it's the artist management to it, whatever it is. But there's certain things, and I think maybe it's just because I've got the hardcore marketing brain, because I've done that for so long to it, where I'm going, there's things you can do, right? There's things you can really do to push this artist out, and like we see it. We're at a show recently. I'm not going to name the artist, but every time we see him, we go like, you should be much bigger. Like like more people should know about you. It should be just a big thing, and you should be filling, like maybe not arenas or anything like that, but at the very least, like the Greek or some of these other ones, so they should be at that level of performance at this point. And you look at it and you go like, well, what are you doing? You have a new album coming out. Like, what are you doing to promote this? And they really haven't fully embraced a lot of the modern like marketing channels that are out these days to it. And again, it's always hard to tell is the label that's doing that, or is it your management? What's really happening to it? Because you have to put those steps in it. Like and artists are funny, but they say, I don't want to play that game. I don't want to get into this. I don't want that social media stuff. I just want it basic. I want to go back to a day when, like I'm just on the road and I sell CDs in this one and going, well, then you're always going to be at this level. Right. So it's like, if you want to get in this, you have to play the game. You have to do, the occasional live streaming on TikTok or Instagram. You have to do these kind of plays. You have to have an active YouTube channel. Like these are just the table stakes now. The idea that like, no, I'm going to hold back and play it cool. Then he goes, well, then that's where you're going to end up. Like it's just the way it is. And record stores are like that too. We're part of that same like equation to where there's these fantastic classic record stores that have been around forever. Like there's one down the street from us, Atomic Records, has been in Burbank for like over 25 years, and it is like it's beloved by the industry, and it's much different, a much different vibe than we are as far as what it is, because it's all used records and it's classic what it is, but they really don't play the rest of the games to it. So like they're not active on Instagram, they're not active on social media. You can't get them through any of the digital like retail platforms that are out there available, this kind of stuff to it. They're just perfectly happy just being them, right? And it doesn't matter. They do great sales. Like nobody cares to it, and we're just happy to be in their orbit. Like when we opened up, we made a big deal of saying we're right down the street from Atomic. Like if you're in town, just it's blocks away. Just come over to see us too. But more and more of us are definitely in the idea of like leaning into it and how can I take advantage of it, and even that record industry conference I was talking about, like they had me as a guest speaker to do this, to talk about like this is what you need to do just from like a local SEO standpoint, like just to make sure to get that part of it right. If you're going to play in the industry, that's where your fans are these days. If you want to get them into the store, like you have to do these types of things. And so again, it's hard to say whether or not like what's holding some of them back on this one, but it's usually the idea of like they're probably trying to play it cool and old school, and that's just not going to work anymore.
Yeah. I know this incredible artist, well, a band actually, and they do strings. There's 4 of them, and I thought, you could do so much more than what you're doing right now. They would play in churches. They would convert a church into a concert.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
But then I think they should get their own record deal at this stage because they're just so good. But they're like, I said, you're not on social media. You're not interacting with the people that are going to your events. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we just want to do this. And I said, well, then you're going to be playing in churches. There's nothing wrong with playing in churches. It's just that you're not, if you're happy with what you're doing right now, then go ahead, don't mark it. But you will not, there's no such thing as viral. Do you believe in that?
There really isn't. Yeah. Viral is definitely what you make it. Yeah. I mean, I knew even before I owned like a retail location, it was the idea of like, you have to put the legwork into this stuff. And we used to, when the term viral became a thing in marketing, like it was the idea of like, I remember bosses that had like, they would find that buzzword for, like, and he goes, can you create something that goes viral? I goes, no, like you can create stuff and hope it goes viral, but you just can't, you can't intentionally say like, this is a viral thing. And we're seeing that now. We had Fred Armisen come in for Record Store Day. And I wouldn't call it viral, but it's definitely like it picked up a lot of speed after the fact, and it's still going. People are still seeing it on TikTok, and every now and then I'll check on the numbers and going, look at that, it's still going, right? And so it's a matter of like, you do have to do all the things to kind of make these things line up. And a lot of times that's working with influencers or working with other people that get involved with it. And, and the right mention by the right person will just skyrocket you. So,
because I do remember a lot of people were talking about how viral I'm sure you remember Gangnam Style.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was pushed by Scooter Braun, the manager of Justin Bieber.
Oh yeah,
that is. I don't know if you call that viral, but I guess
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's backed up. I remember like it's funny. Back in my Napster days, was about the time when like the viral concept really kicked in.
Right.
And I still had bosses that were saying like, do something that goes viral. And I said, look, you can again make something and see where it goes. But we were telling them like, you just putting it up, it's not going to do anything. And we've had I had multiple clients for the ad agency where they were saying like, oh, we created this to go viral and it just kind of laid there and everything. I said, well, did you boost it? Did you put any money behind it? What it is? And they go, well, no, it's supposed to be viral. They go, yeah, that's not how it works. Like you still have to goose it out of the gate and make sure enough people see it for it to go viral. But it's one of the great misconceptions of that type of marketing.
Yeah, I think they're now replacing the word viral with organic.
Yes.
Like you have to do organic. It's like, it's the same thing.
It is really the same thing. Yeah.
You just change the word.
I've always said that like marketers love a rebrand and that includes rebranding themselves on occasion. So like it's like for a while like, oh, now we're growth hackers. Great. Yeah, now we're growth hackers.
Okay, now it's getting some flashback in my marketing days. Okay, let's get to just your personal opinion on music. There are so many musicians right now that are topping the chart. Can't sell a damn stadium, or not even a theater. Do you think it's healthy the way labels are pushing these people on the chart but are unable to sell out a 5,000
arena?
Yeah.
I think and that's we talked about like a backlash or a type of a pushback when it came to all the vinyl variants and stuff like that. I think they may have pushed it too far when it came to ticket prices and where they're trying to put them for the certain bands to it. And we saw that last year. It happened with the Black Keys, which were it's funny. They're definitely a big band, definitely to it. And like the last time I saw the Black Keys, they played the stadium. They played the Kia Center out here and filled it up, and it was fine. Like there was no trouble with it, what it is. But then the last album came out, and they were shooting to do that again, and they had announced it, and they had locations, everything, and the ticket sales just weren't happening, and they ended up like canceling that tour and actually firing their management for a little bit to say like, I think we just swung too big. And now the new rung is basically said now they're playing the Palladium or the Greek or whatever it is, and so they basically said, well, let's take a step down and let's do a check to it. And as I always said, like that's really just capitalism. Like the market will push itself as far as it can until people basically cry uncle on this stuff and say like, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to pay this thing. And that's just, good old fashioned like market forces at work to it. And I think we kind of got there. I think everybody's kind of really indicated that like, unless you're bringing something to the table that is really unique or something that is really mind-blowing or that you're never going to see again, we're not going to pay that prices. I mean, I saw the Wu-Tang Clan is touring this summer to it, and they're going to play the Crypto, which I can see out the window from here. But it's like they're going to play that too, and I assure you they're going to have no trouble filling that up. Like it will just be fine. Like and the tickets start at $100 for the rafters, and nobody's going to care. Like they're just going to show up because when are the chances that's going to happen again? But if you're talking, and Taylor Swift's Eras tour was another great example. Like because she could demand it and she's going to pull it off, and I doubt it's going to be very anytime soon where she's going to have to take a step down as far as venue size go. But there's plenty of other ones where you go, I don't think you're going to get there. Like, unfortunately, so I'm a big fan of Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats. It's a hell of a band, great act, just one of the most fun live shows you'll ever see in your life. And, over time, we saw them at different levels to it, where they play the Greek or they'd play, those type of levels to it. And that's a good size for them, period. Like, that's where you really go, don't get any bigger than that. Because otherwise, I think, given the type of music and everything, it would lose something in the process of it. But this last tour, they tried playing the Forum, and it was unfortunately a little sad because it wasn't sold out. You could tell like the upper seats weren't full, and they sold out the area down right in front of the stage, but like it just wasn't capacity for what it is. And you're going like, oh, this should have got moved, or they should have made a decision to say like, let's keep this like a rung smaller the next time around. And I think that's just a market and not anything to do with the band per se, because they're still very popular to it. But when enough times where you're saying like these tickets are all $100 to start with for, the worst seats in the house kind of thing. And we want these big things, and you lose that intimacy for a band that you really think deserve it. then you're not going to get it. And I'm seeing more and more of that happen. Like
Right.
My Morning Jacket was another great band that I love, and I noticed they're playing the Palladium this time, and they had already gone up a couple times. They played the Hollywood Bowl, they played a couple other ones, and but now they think they realized, like, let's keep it down here. Like, there's no reason to really get that big, and we'll just do more shows to kind of fill it up.
Right. But then the money is on touring.
Yeah.
If you can't tour, if you can't sell out your stadium, then what's going to happen with it?
Exactly. Yeah. The money is in the touring, the money's in the merch, the money's in
Right.
that. That's unfortunately just the way the market goes. But thankfully, like we said, physical media has kind of rounded that out a little bit more than it was. But business people are creative. They'll find the way to get the money out of everybody for this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the touring it's interesting. You could hear people kind of crying about that a lot on stuff, and even with Taylor Swift, even though she sold out, even there was no problem selling this kind of stuff to it, you heard a certain level of backlash that came from it, where they're saying, well, now we can't get tickets and this, and they were calling up Ticketmaster in front of Congress and things like that, like that. And I go, oh, you guys are cute. It's you're new to this, right? That you know that like this is what happens with concerts is they sell out, and you're not
Right.
always going to get a ticket. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ticketmaster is they're trash.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that. It's funny. I always tell a story that I think if Ticketmaster and Live Nation, all these other ones, when there really is a serious like investigation into that business model by Congress, whatever it is, because they've gotten called up before and they've asked questions, but I don't think they've really gone deep into the model in this one. But I think when they do, I think that it's going to reveal a lot of things that people don't really want them to hear. And years ago, I interviewed at Ticketmaster when I was still kind of bouncing around on the corporate side of things to it. And I can remember one of the executives telling me that he goes, yeah, a lot of those fees we collect, there's a lot more going to the band than you think it is, right? And it's basically they've just kind of made an agreement to be the bad guy in this equation, because people go like, well, look, we'll take the hate, on this one to it, because the band doesn't want to get the hate for it as being the one that's like, well, this is why it's so expensive. It's like, well, no, we're going to collect other fees, and they're still going to go back and pay for other things, or somebody has to get paid in this one. So it's probably a lot more complex than people want to give it credit to. But yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll interview somebody from Ticketmaster.
Yeah.
I can at least curse them on their
Yeah.
face.
So what is it? Live Nation's right there, right? So yeah. So yeah.
Okay, so next question. We have not had like a Michael Jackson in a while, like a big pop star. This actually, I was having a conversation with him just
Yeah.
before he came. I would guess that the last big one that we've had is probably Olivia Rodrigo. Do you think it's because of TikTok? You find somebody new every 3 seconds on that app that people just don't find the novelty of supporting somebody
At that level
At
to it.
that
Yeah.
level.
Rodrigo's good, and Charlie is good, like is really good at that too. And who's it? Christina Carpenter, whatever. But like
Sabrina
Sabrina
Carpenter.
Carpenter, rather. Yeah, she's doing really good at that. She's fun, by the way. She's talk about a good sport and really like just leaning into it and having a good time with being a pop star. I give her a lot of credit on this one. But but like I'd say as like numbers go though, I mean Taylor definitely hit Michael Jackson levels. I haven't compared
I'd
those
say
numbers in a
so,
long
yeah.
time, but it's one of the things where. I think she's surpassed it. Like her tour like was so big that it would change local economies when she'd come into town, right? Like people were, it's like when the Olympics has to come to town, it goes, all right, we're gonna have to restructure things, and then like new roads are gonna have to be built and things like that. So I think it does happen every now and then, and that level of Michael Jackson or whatever it is kind of like a once in a lifetime. But the reason why we don't see more of them is I think the market is a lot more fractured, and they're just a lot more artists, and it's because there are so many more ways to get discovered and to get your voice out there these days. But where you think Justin Bieber started as a YouTube star, when you think about it, and he's certainly not as big as he was, but he's certainly still a player in this game and is definitely involved to it. So like those types of things are happening more and more, and we've got these new ways to be discovered, and they've also got all these new ways for like acts or songs and things like that have been around forever to get rediscovered because of that, and that's that TikTok effect as well. Like it's one of the things where we'll have kids come into the day and they'll ask about some like completely random like Fleetwood Mac song, like that it was a deep track that suddenly got popular because of TikTok, and and you have to explain to him. It goes like, that song was never on an album. It was the B-side of a 45, like that. And you see him just kind of go, I don't know what those words mean. And I go, yeah, I know. You can't just come in and buy another copy of like Rumors, like it's not on there. It was only on this version of it. And they go like, no, but it's there. I can hear it, right? I go, yeah, it's complicated. And that is kind of a mind blower for like the kids and stuff like that. Just say like, there was a time to where like, if you didn't buy it on this one format, like if you bought it as a format, that was the only way you could get it. Like we blow their minds all the time to where like the Beatles, a lot of their early work was just 45s, and then they collect them into an album. Like that was what it was. There were certain Led Zeppelin songs that were like, the only way you could get it is if you happened to buy the 45, or if you heard it on the radio. Like, and that was it. And they still like they can't wrap their mind around that. It's like, this is the way it is. And if you're a collector, you'd go back and find it or what it is, and then forever, like some of those Led Zeppelin songs were like they were only ever on 45s. People didn't have them on a physical format until they did like a greatest hits collection way down the road. And so like now it's happening a little bit more often because of these deluxe editions and things like that. So that concept's kind of going away of like, this was it. This was the only way to get it. But it still happens on occasion, but it's fascinating. And really, it's why a lot of our job as record store owners is there's a certain education element to it, to say like, yeah, see, this is how this works. And it's kind of weird and to it. And you really have to get kind of almost educate them on this concept of scarcity that, say like, remember you took that class in high school. Like this is what's happening here. And it's not, you're dealing with things in the physical world. It's not like streaming where like, I can just get it whenever I want to. He goes, nope, this is it. Like, if you really want this is the only way to get it.
Right.
But, yeah.
That's fun though.
Yeah,
so,
it is. Yeah.
So you still see a lot of Gen Z walking into your store.
Oh, we see a lot of Gen Z coming to the store, like especially our store. Like, that was by design. Like we really did, and it came from multiple levels. We looked at a lot of what record stores were, and I had that experience because I was like, Ellen and I were both collectors, but long before we were like this, and Ellen specifically, like I really wanted a lot of her input on it and what it was like to be like a woman, or just like a, or somebody that was maybe younger, whatever it is, and trying to go into like an old school record store, and they can, not be the most welcoming places in the world, like like you're just going to get a grunt out of the owner. If anything out of nobody's saying, hey, welcome. Nobody's helping you define everything. If you're lucky, they'll just kind of say it's over there, and that's about as good as you get. They're dirty. They can be kind of scary. They're dark and unorganized and things like that. And we said, we don't want to be any of those things. We want to be opening and friendly and very community driven and just all the things. Really, it was by design. And so we've got certain rules that are built into it where I said, we've got a no cardboard rule here, and we make sure that the aisles are nice and open and everything's organized, and everything's really easy to read and find and things like that. But even then, you're still having to instruct people. Like we've noticed this thing, and it's very funny, and we smile every time it happens to it. But you can tell like kids that have no experience of actually like coming into a record store to buy something, and so they'll come in and without touching a thing or without looking in any under the genres or going to things, whatever, they'll just kind of go, "Do you have this?" Like they're talking to a search engine, like that. And it's like, well, no, like he goes, it's so, hey, welcome to a record store for your first time. Like come over here. So all the genres are labeled and it's all alphabetical. So you just got to go through it and dig through the racks and like that. And it's all out. We don't hide anything. So like, if you don't see it, it just means we ran out. I know that's a concept that's new, but sometimes you just run out of these things. And they go like, oh, okay. Well, like, yes, we will get more. He goes, we will get more, they will show up eventually. And that's just still kind of the way, or maybe they won't because that was a limited run and they only made 1,000 of them. He goes like, why would they do that? It goes, yeah, it's called scarcity. It's a marketing thing. So yeah.
I do have the son of my friend saw us bring out like a turntable, and so we were trying to operate the turntable and was looking at us just strange, like we were weird, like aliens. And I guess at some point he just couldn't take it. And he was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, yeah. It's, what are you actually doing? It's funny. We're one of the first stores in a long time I've seen that where we have a listening booth in this, and so we set up record players and we've got headphones and the whole thing to it. And we tell like, look, if it's open, you can go in there and do this thing, and they're fascinated by it,
Yeah.
like that. And originally we put it there, for the hardcore people that are really evaluating a used record, they really want to listen to it before they take it home, especially if it's a higher price record, and that's really what it was designed for. But in the back of my mind, I was going, but we're probably going to get a lot of like influencers or other people that were doing it for social because it's a cute picture. It's kind of like, hey, this is this. And so we made it like look very cool inside of it. And that's happened. But the thing we didn't think was going to happen was that you've got Gen Z where like they buy this record and then they'll tell you, can I listen to it here? Because they don't have a place to listen to it yet, because they're kind of buying to collect it early on because they love that artist.
Yeah.
But they haven't been able to afford a record player yet. And so the whole concept, it goes, yeah, come on in, we'll show you how to use it. And it goes, this one's easy, it's automatic, you can just push the button and it'll start playing. And you see they're just fascinated by it. And it's I love it because I remember for a while there was these videos going around where it was like exposing children to like dinosaur media or like different inventions, whatever, and they do something goofy like put a telephone in front of them and say like figure out how to make a call or how to do this one, or they put a Walkman and go like, well, what am I supposed to do with this or whatever, like that. And those are fun, like they're fun from the standpoint of like, look at this kid that doesn't know how to make this work. Right. But and what we've really seen is more of a fascination and more of like a desire to learn, where they go like, I really do want to learn how to do this stuff, and they ask their questions about it, and we really make sure that we're like, as far as like our attitude in the store to it, it's nothing like the movie High Fidelity. So we're not making fun of people, and we're not barking at people when they come in. We're not telling them that their decisions are bad or what it is. Matter of fact, we learn as much as they might in those instances, because if they ask for somebody that we just haven't heard of because maybe they're a new artist or really deep, we'll say like, tell us about it. Like what are they? Are they, what genre do they fall into, or like how long have they been around? And a lot of times we'll look it up in the moment and kind of go like, look at that. Wow, they have had a couple albums out, what it is. And sometimes we're doing that just to let them know, because they're looking for a record for that artist, and they go like, this is one of those weird instances where they didn't bother to press it on vinyl, or they didn't bother to do it, and so they've only had this one type of media. And we run in that now where you've got again a lot of Gen Xers and things like that are getting back into record collecting, but what they're trying to grab is the stuff that's maybe from the late 80s or the 90s, and there's stuff that where they just never bothered. It only ever came out in CD. And so what we're having on Record Store Day is that like it's we're seeing these things where it's this band from the 90s where it's like first time on vinyl like that, and you go like, well, that's amazing. Like that never came out of vinyl. That was the biggest record in the world. That was the biggest thing in the world for a while.
Yeah.
And it never had a vinyl pressing to it. And like one of my local favorites of here in LA was a band called the Oingo Boingo. And their last 2 or 3 records that they came out with, like they never bothered to do a vinyl pressing. It was only available on CD. And people will come in looking for those records, and they go like, and finally they're starting to go back and say like, yeah, they did do a pressing of it. They only did 1,000 of them, and they're gone. Like now you have to get up in there, and it's really of a trip. But it's also fun in that things, and there's a lot of education, and it's sometimes it's the parents that are looking to buy a gift for their kid and said like, I'm looking for this, doing it. Go, oh, that record's worth $500. And you're like, what? Yeah, says, oh yeah, they don't do anything like that. And
yeah. Okay, so a little bit about your business. Mm-hmm. What is the long-term plan? Do you want to become as big as Amoeba, or?
I don't know. It's funny. Like Amoeba's pretty big, and I remember, again, no knock to Amoeba because I was in there a ton beforehand to it. But like we kind of describe Amoeba as the circus. Like it's so big and it's so whatever. And we personally think we would lose some intimacy from that one. We definitely could go a little bit bigger. Like there's every now and then we've got a couple places that are in Magnolia Park that we look at and go, it'd be fun to be in there. Like if we got up to that level, that's probably about as big as we ever need to go. And most of the time it would just be like, a little bit more inventory, but also like a larger stage or like more things for this. Or in my case, I do woodworking, and I said it'd be fun to have like furniture, like actually have record cabinets or things like that. So, and that's more where we want to be, and just make it more of a community space, and just have the room to do these kind of things to it. But but beyond that, we can see the idea of like opening up more locations. That is something that's kind of crossed our mind of like, hey, where could we go? Can we open up one in San Diego? Can we open one in Northern California? And Ellen is from Toronto, Canada originally, and we kind of said like, could we do one in Toronto? Because that'd be like hey, we've got it in both of our home places, and that would be to it. So that definitely crosses our mind. And then there's other aspects to where it's things that are adjacent to the original model to it, like producing shows.
Well, I was going to ask that. Yeah.
So that's definitely come up, and that's something we're already kind of looking into because it's almost like you fall into it. There's certain things where because we work with so many artists and on their way up and things like that we go, this would be neat. Like one of our big vision, we have these kind of like dream sessions every now and then where we're saying like, wouldn't it be neat if this happened? And we were talking about the fact that Burbank has a kind of like a bowl kind of thing that's called the Starlight Bowl, and it's been there forever, and it's actually now getting updated after some damage from the recent like storms and everything that happened earlier this year. And when it comes back, the plan is that they want to do more with it and actually have some things. And I go, wouldn't it be fun to do like a soul music festival or a jazz festival or something? We don't want to be like the next place for Coachella. Like that's not our jam, but it is something where it's a matter of like, can we kind of highlight some artists that usually don't get a lot of attention these days, or used to but don't anymore. Like I grew up out in, like I said in Southern California, and one of the local jazz sessions used to put on this great blues festival every year out in Long Beach, and it was there, and they'd fill up a big park area, and they'd get great artists, and I got to see all these legends of it. But you're just not seeing that happen anymore with that genre. So you're not, and we're just happy that the what used to be called the Playboy Jazz Festival is now back this year at Hollywood Bowl, and it's under Blue Note, and it's actually not just the label, but associated with the new Blue Note Club that's here in LA, and so we're going, that's great because there definitely is like a request for jazz, and a lot of people going, we get questions all the time. It goes, you guys know any places I could go to like go see some live jazz, whatever it is? And I'm going, well, that's a thing that could be done, like and so we've thought about that as like it's like we can do these festivals, or maybe we buy a club and make that into a jazz club or things like that. But right now we're more focused on like just paying off the startup loans and things like that. But it's but the vision is there to say like, where can we take this, and we also think about the idea of like, pressing our own music too. We become a label in ourselves, and it's funny. There is a Run Out Groove that's a label already that is actually a sub label of Warner Brothers. That was a way for them to kind of repress like hidden gems in their catalog and things like that. And so we probably have to call it something else, but it is something we say like that'd be cool, and the ability to do that. Is become easier. There is certain pressing plants, especially just in the area. We're getting new ones all the time now where, where you say like, hey, that is very possible to actually back that. And it said like, we just got to find an artist that we can do these things to, or it's becoming more popular these days to be these kind of like sub labels that go out and really do kind of like pillage these giant catalogs, but they have certain artists or certain things that are just getting ignored, and say like, well, this the Misfits should have repressings of their record. Those are it's a massive band, and then like nobody is pressing their stuff or whatever it is. And so the Record Store Day group is partnered with an indie label to say like, great, we can put these out as like the RSD essentials and things like that. So we can say like that could definitely be something we could jump into eventually. Right?
Well, I hope you do.
Yeah.
We do need live events, I believe, for music.
I think
we
the
need
live
more.
events is that seems to be like the next logical extension for us. And like, I was a heavy concert going. Ellen was bartender at the Largo Theater for a long time, and so she's got that kind of in her blood as well. And had her own stint as a rock photographer. So it's one of the things where we're going, this seems like a very like logical move for us once we kind of get there. But yeah.
Okay, so I guess my last question would be tips for those who want to get into the same line of business. What is the best way to get foot traffic in your store?
So we kind of talked about it before, but it's like you really do need to put the work in on like the basics of modern marketing, right? And that means that you have to do the local SEO. You have to play on social media. You have to get involved with it. You have to do the partnerships with the listing events and things like that. Because otherwise, you're just going to get ignored, right? Like it's like I said, it's cute to kind of think like, well, we'll just put a sign out and people will wander in and it's going to be great, but we do all the things, and we still have people constantly walk in going like, how long have you guys been here? It's like, and so there is still very much brand new people coming into the store, no matter how big we make these events and how big we get out there and how exposed we get to it. We think, well, we've got to get to the point now where everybody around us has seen it, but we've got people that live around the corner and go like, I never get up here, so it's still a process, and it's a process that doesn't stop. Like, it's just not just a matter of like, what we used to call in marketing, set it and forget it. That just
That's
never
not,
existed.
yeah.
You really just have to you can't take your foot off the gas on these things, and it's a little exhausting sometimes of just how much you put into it. But look enough, like I have the benefit of being a marketer before I did this one, and I think that gets me a lot further than most, because I don't have to learn how these systems work. I can just dump in and do them and say like, yes, let's do that. But even then, keeping up with what's new and all the different things to it, and saying like, how can we get more involved with TikTok as a record store? Like, what can we do there? And who are we competing with in that market? Do we still have to do the same kind of contents? Do I have to dance? I don't know. So it's
Maybe do a dance challenge.
Maybe I've had a couple videos where I've danced in them, or we've had dances off with people to it, and those are the ones people come and goes, dig the moves. I try. So.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope that you do get into events. I think that's the one thing that the music industry will never get enough
Tire
of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we
I
need
think it's
that.
definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.